persists. Of course, I've offered some reasons why it may not, but if it does persist, industrial countries will have to figure out how to restructure their promises, whether it's debt, whether it's social security, or whether the promise of low taxes, and how to distribute the burden of the slow-growing economy amongst people. And one example, only example that you might want to pay attention to, is the city of Detroit in the United States, which has seen a massive erosion of auto worker jobs. It recently filed for a bankruptcy, but it had to make very tough choices between servicing its pensioners or its debt, keeping its museums open or its police force intact, how much of the city to actually keep as a city, and how much to make into a green zone or forest. That's the kind of choice they have to make. More such difficult choices may well come if this secular stagnation persists. But let me take a few years more of slow growth as what we in India will have to face. Now, what this means is a traditional development path for emerging markets, which is export-led growth, has become significantly more difficult. Remember that over the last 3 decades, every Asian country has developed on the backs of export-led growth. In fact, most recently, Latin America has developed on the back of exporting to China, which has exported to the industrial countries. So export-led growth has been a facet of emerging market growth. And why is that? Because relying on domestic demand is very difficult because of the temptation to overstimulate. Developing countries, when they have to rely on their own demand, tend to run excessively large fiscal deficits, have credit booms, which turn into credit busts, have excessively high inflation. Those are the problems we always had in relying only on domestic demand, which is why when outsiders want your goods, when you can export efficiently, that becomes a very conservative and a sustainable way of growth. That's more difficult today. It's also become more difficult because of the abundance of liquidity sloshing around the world as a result of the ultra-accommodative monetary policies. Any signs that you're growing well immediately attracts a huge amount of capital into your country and can precipitate a credit or asset price boom as well as exchange rate overvaluation. Why is this a concern? It is a concern because eventually when monetary policies in industrial countries tighten, some of the capital is likely to depart and depart very quickly, and if emerging markets are vulnerable at that stage, they pay a price. We had a mini episode of this kind last year in summer, where there were some hints that the money would be withdrawn after the Fed announced that it would taper its quantitative easing, and that did create a significant amount of market disruption even in India. Now, having weathered those initial squalls of the taper tantrums, what should we take away for stable growth, assuming that industrial countries are likely to grow slowly for the next few years? I would focus on 4 key aspects. One which has been